Hello everybody, this is Soups here, and today we are going to be talking about all the various different types of swords and stuff like that. And for starters, we're going to focus on, one second here, we are going to start from the bottom here and look at the basic sword. Now, the basic sword is your fairly standard issue sword, and it's the sword that you start the game with. And there isn't really anything interesting going on with this sword. It's just, it has the same Q as the sharp sword, which is a penetrating thrust type attack that does massive amounts of damage to anyone caught in a range. Now, the direct upgrade to that is the sharp sword here, where once you get your very first prompt at level 10, you will want to say, I want to increase the sharpness of my sword. Now, this will result in, basically, it's the basic sword, but it has far more damage, and as such, it is much more dangerous and much more effective given you have the right equipment. Next up, we have the daggers, and the daggers are really just, it's a dagger. What else can I say? It's very good for thief builds, it's extremely quick, and it's one of the best ones for being extremely fast on your feet when it comes to combat. One of the main stats that you should try to focus on with this one, rather than unlike sharp sword, the daggers are a lot less jack-of-all-tradesy and a lot more offensive speed. And at the other end of the spectrum is the longsword, which increases the range of your hits and changes your fighting style to be a lot more heavy-hitting. Now, let's move on to the final one, which is magic. Magic is quite possibly the most interesting one, as it literally turns your sword into a saber made entirely out of mana. And as you can imagine, it functions like one as well. And now, the Q of magic fires a beam, which deals consistent damage based off of your magic boost stat. And I forgot to mention the Qs of the other ones. That's what happens when you do this all in one take. But the dagger has a combo extender as its Q, and the longsword has a shit, I'm trying to think of the word. The longsword has a heavy slash downward, and that deals immense damage when paired with the right buffs. Now, let's move back to sharp sword here and look at its two variations. We have the Lord Sword and the Jagged Sawblade. And from here, once you reach level 30, you can branch off into either the Lord Sword or the Jagged Sawblade. Now, the Lord Sword is a bit of an interesting case because its spin attack, while effective, it's kind of looked down upon in the community due to it not really having the best damage output. But its evolutions from this point onward are extremely powerful and certainly worth the grind, supposedly. However, the PvE effectiveness of this weapon is kind of eh. In PvP, if you can use it right and you have the right equipment, it is absolutely worth getting your hands on if you're looking for a jack-of-all-trades build. Now, the Jagged Sword, on the other hand, is focused more on bleed and various other status effects. It's more of your berserker type build, the more I will destroy you all sort of build, where you really go hard and just go absolutely bonkers on everything. Now, now one of its main quirks is that when you use its heavy attack, it inflicts a bleed, and this bleed damage ticks over time, and I believe it scales with physical. However, I can't 100% confirm that, because I haven't done enough research into this sword in particular. Now, moving on to the daggers, your first two tier 2 options are range, which turns you into an agile short sword. Now, the agile short sword, nobody ever goes this because it's an unfinished route. It stops at tier 2, and that's it. And as such, not many people actually even think about this even being an option. And even more so, it's one of the most underused weapons in the entire game next to the Hexblade. And we'll get to the Hexblade in a minute. But the Q move of this move is also completely unknown to me, which is an unfortunate development. However, I plan to do more research, and I may make a follow-up video to explain that as well. Now, the sharp blade. Now, the sharp dagger is simply a heavier damaging dagger. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a direct upgrade from the original dagger, and thus has the same moveset as it, and is simply just higher damage. And now, moving on to the longsword tier 2s, we have damage, and damage is a massive greatsword. And now this greatsword is essentially the same. Essentially, their movesets are sort of identical to the longsword, although it's much slower, although it can deal far more damage. And as such, it's ideal for high damaging tank builds and stuff of the like. Now, if you want to completely focus on being a slow heavy hitter, I advise going greatsword. If you want to tank damage, if you want to go to tank damage, you go for the defense, and if you want to do even more damage and have good range while doing so, I'd go for the buster sword. We'll get to those two in a minute. Now, if you want to simply go for the novelty of an absurdly long sword, there is the longer sword. Now, the longer sword is what happens when you ask for range again, and this is probably one of the more. This is also one of the underused weapon types because of the fact that it stops at tier 2. Now, it has been rumored that there is, in fact, a longest sword, which is a tier 3 evolution of this. However, all images of it are fake. It is photoshopped. Now, moving back up to the magic blade, there are 3 variations that you can pursue. There is pure magic, which creates a magic greatsword, and there's holy magic, which allows you to pursue the holy sword, and then there's hex. Now, out of the 3, magic is focused on pure, extensive damage output. Hex is focused on debuffs and hindering the opponent, although as of right now, it's functionally identical to regular magic, although it deals far more damage at the cost of defense. But, the holy magic, on the other hand, is built explicitly for healing playstyles. Now, healing, this is why it's very effective in a healing setting, and it's best paired with the cleric guild for that same reason, because the cleric guild, its T move scales with holy, so therefore, all of the skills are kind of complemented by it. Now, the Hexblade, on the other hand, is functionally identical to the Magic Sword and is sort of like the Magic Greatsword in that it's effectively a direct upgrade, although slightly different. And that's because it scales with both Hex and Magic Boost. And this means that you can do some insane damage values if you manage to pair this with the right armor set. And the fact that nobody uses Hex and that's so underused means that you can capitalize on people's unawareness of how it actually works. Now, moving on to the tier 3s. Oh boy, this is the crazy bit. So, from the Lord's Sword, there is the from top to bottom, there is the Paladin's Sword, which grants you the ability to cast a bolt of healing lightning from your hand that heals allies and damages enemies. And its main use is essentially becoming a hybrid build of both tanky, high damage effectiveness and healing, although it's not nearly as effective healing as the Pure Sword, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, if you want even more sharpness, you can get the Perfect Sword, which is effectively a boosted Lord Sword, although its damage has gotten so high that it's one of the most effective weapons in for the end game if you are going for a jack of all trades. However, if you want to attack a little faster, the Q move of the katana here, not only does the base katana already have an increased movement speed and physical attack speed, it also is capable of summoning a shadow clone of yourself that is capable of doing its own separate 3-hit combo, which means that you can basically hit people twice at once. And this allows you to get in 6-hit combos, which are absolutely insane. And as such, this is quite possibly one of the best sets if you're going for a nice jack-of-all-trades. And if you're going for a Berserker build, we go back to Jagged. Now, Jagged, if you choose to go for Strength, you can, or if you choose to go for Jagged, once again, you will get the Jagged Greatsword. Now, the Jagged Greatsword is renowned for being functionally identical to the longsword, and that it has a very powerful overhead slash as its Q, but this time it inflicts bleed, which makes it functionally way, way, way stronger. And its cousin, the Siphon, if you choose to go for Siphon, Siphon will grant you the Blood Sword. Now, the Blood Sword, it is very good for vampires or just lifesteal in general, because its Q move, it strikes the opponent and they will take damage over time while you heal that damage that they take. And this makes it very effective with vampire builds because you can effectively just regenerate all the damage you're dealing as long as you can get in there and actually deal damage without, the opponent dodging and stuff like that. Now, back to the daggers. Dagger has 2 tier 3 options. These 2 tier 3 options are for sharpness, there's the sickle, which which has slightly more damage and is a lot more effective in close quarters combat. However, it also has the added bonus of being the only weapon in the entire game to have it's one of 2 weapons in the entire game that has a Q move that deals hex damage. And this means that and the Q move, basically you strike the target and it casts a linking beam that links you to your target, and this slows them down temporarily and allows you to get in there and deal massive damage. The best armor set for this is probably the Reaper Ninja set, because the Reaper Ninja set is a bit of a oddball, and that it also scales with physical and hex damage. On the other side of the spectrum, there's the Poison Dagger, which is effectively what happens when you take Jagged and mix it with the Dagger. It's a sword that deals. It's a tiny sword with a combo extender that deals damage over time. Now, the Great Sword. There is the Great Shield and the Buster Sword. The Great Shield allows you to block, and its Q move grants you a shield bash, which allows you to stun your enemies. Now, this is probably like your best bet for a tank build. It's like, ooh, you want to be tanky? You want to be tanky. All right, you want to be tanky? This is what you go for. You go for the Great Shield. Now, if you want to do immense nuclear amounts of damage, like we're talking one-shotting people, the Buster Sword is your best bet. It busts people in half. That is like, if this thing were put in a store and it was like sitting on the mantle, this would have a sign under it that says, it busts people in half. This thing deals insane amounts of damage, and it's one of the most effective damage-dealing weapons in the entire game, next to some of the endgame magic weapons, which we will get to in a minute. Now, speaking of, let's move over to those. So, for pure magic, if you go for pure magic, there is the Energized Sword, which allows you to do a massive downward slash. And this massive downward slash travels at insane speeds, which means that if you were to pair this with a Flux Mage and time your attack perfectly, this attack would essentially be instantaneous death for anyone caught within the crossfire. It's very easy to dodge horizontally, but the attack travels so fast that most people will have no time to react, and as such, it's a very effective combat weapon if you're going for a high damage mage build. Now, if you want to really change things up and you want more strength, you can go for the Earthblade. The Earthblade is different from every other weapon in the magic tree in that it scales off of physical damage because it's made out of rock instead of mana, and its main ability is a massive AoE Earthquake, and this is also a very effective tank item, although it's very, very unorthodox due to the fact that most mage sets have most mages usually don't run with that sort of setup. However, this also makes them extremely effective in close quarters combat and the like, because usually nobody expects an earth sword to come out of any fight. It's one of the most unexpected combat encounters, in my personal opinion. Alexa, stop. That was very poorly timed. Anyways, since this is being done one take, I'm not gonna edit that out. But the holy sword. The holy sword is this is the pure sword, rather. This is a direct upgrade to the holy sword, and its Q move is very similar to the original holy sword in that it's a massive AoE heal. And I forgot to mention the Qs for both of those, which is a shame. But this massive AoE heal scales with your holy and is very effective in cleric builds. Now, if you want to go for some sort of what can I say, paladin-y sort of build that's like a bit more focused on damage over time and just being a fire mage, or just, you know, you think fire's badass, there's the fire sword, which is a branch off of the holy sword. And that is, and unfortunately, the hexblade, like it's like some of its cousins in the hexblade, agile sword, and longer sword, it does not have a tier 3 variant, which means that these are kind of left in the dust. However, they can still be viable in the endgame if you know how to build around them. Now, let's move on to the secret. Fist. Now, we've talked about, now there's a ton of YouTubers who have talked about Fist already, but I'm going to just run you through the basics. Fist is a very counter-heavy sort of playstyle, and how should I say, it's very focused on getting around various combat situations by bobbing and weaving and stuff like that, and water style, and it has two variants. It has water style, and it has Wolf Fang Fist. Now, Wolf Fang Fist is a go-to for many physical players because it has a very fast barrage, which the longer you one thing to note with every single rapid outburst of multi-hit damage, like the spin attacks on these two swords and the barrage on this pair of gauntlets, is very, very heavily. The duration of the attack scales with your. The duration of the attack scales with your. What's the word? It scales with the amount of times you've hit them. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have water flowing style. I believe it's called water flowing fist. And water flowing fist, how it works is that in a combat encounter, one thing most people don't expect is a ranged attack with a physical fighter. And that's the magic of water flowing fist, because it's extremely underrated due to the lack of, being able to do massive damage with the barrage of Wolf Fang Fist. Water flowing fist is capable of firing a Hadouken-like attack that completely shreds people's typical expectations of, if you're gonna, because like the first thing you see when you come against a fist user is like, oh, I can stay out of his range and we're fine. But no, this allows him to actually zone a little bit, and this makes things a little bit more complicated. Now, moving on from that, how do you get Fist? Well, I just mentioned the NPC's name already. His name is Fist. You can find him in the Vinelands on top of a spire of rock that you can find roughly around the center near Overgrow Town. Basically, if you go in from Overgrow Town and you walk into Vinelands, the first couple spires you'll pass won't have him on it, but you'll eventually notice one that'll have these roots and stuff that you can climb on, and it looked like there's like a mini parkour to get to the top. If you do that mini parkour, then you'll be able to get your hands on Tier 1 Fist, which you can then evolve into these. Now, how do you evolve? Well, let's get to that. So, to evolve your swords, the best way you can evolve your swords is to level up, really. Now, the level requirements is level 10 for your Tier 1, which are these ones, and level 30 for your Tier 2s, which are these, and and finally for Tier 3 ones, we have the level 60. You have to get to level 60. Now bear in mind, 75 is the current max level as of the time of this video, and is very hard to achieve, and as such, you may have to do some grinding in the tundra, and as you know, probably from various other YouTube videos, the tundra is hard as balls. Now, as for, that's basically covering every single sword and what sword you should pick, which is the main purpose of this video. I forgot to state that in the beginning, but the main purpose of this video is what sword should you pick? Well, it really depends on your personal preference and your playstyle. And that's why I basically covered every single sword in brief and how you should play them. Now, credit goes to Ioi, or however you pronounce it on Discord, Ioi, tag 1337, and they are one of the people that runs the official the unofficial VoxlBlade Trello. Now, if you have any other questions or suggestions for videos I should do in the future, feel free to just put a comment down below. If you want, you can subscribe. I don't really care. But this is just meant to be an informative little skit that I decided to record for the sake of you guys' oh, what sword do I pick? And stuff like that you've been posting all over, like, info Discords and, you know, and Q&A in the VoxlBlade Discord. So this is meant to reach out to those people who are lost and have no idea what sword to pick and have no idea where to go with their playstyle. This is my definitive, like, what sword you should go for guide. While it's not exactly definitive, it's more of just I'm trying to explain all the swords in one take and what playstyle you should use with each of them. Anyways, so that's all for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and we'll see you all next time.